Welcome to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. We are your hosts, Jasper Rivers and Eric Muller, and today we are talking about the biggest opportunity in the short-term rental space. Eric, what's up?
What's up, homie? How you doing, man?
Good, man. This must be one of your favorite topics.
Yeah, I haven't shut up about it recently, huh?
Yeah, and it's cool because a lot of people are asking questions. Seems like a lot of people are interested in this topic. So, I think it would be good to dive in and really get into the details a bit on the opportunity that we are seeing and how that aligns with what we're investing in as well.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week, but the industry, as we all know, has changed so much over the last 18 months. That I think this topic is super important to talk about, and I think it's going to open up a lot of opportunity for a lot of people in our industry. So let's dive into it, man. Let's talk about this opportunity and this topic, and we'll get into it.
Yeah. I watched an interview with Brian Chesky yesterday. That he did this a couple of weeks ago, and what was really interesting to me about this interview was he talked about how he believes that there's a revolution in travel. And this is really interesting because I'm also speaking to people who believe that travel, once this whole pandemic is over, that we're going 100% back to normal. Like everyone's just going to travel like they used to. People are going to live like they used to. Versus, Brian, he said in the interview, he said he believes this is the biggest revolution in travel since, he said, since the internet, or even since, I think he said since people started flying.
What's he mean by that?
So, yeah. So basically what he's saying is, because people are not going to go back to working from offices, or at least not everyone. He's saying, especially the younger CEOs, like everybody has learned now how you can get work done through Zoom, right? Yep. He was talking about how Airbnb did an IPO. He said we rebuilt the company from the ground up. There were so many changes on Airbnb, and they all did that remote. Right? Nobody's working at the Airbnb headquarters at that time. So he's saying, like, look, the world has learned how to work remotely using tools like Zoom, and that's something that we are using right now. So to us, this is all normal, right? But for a lot of people, this is new, right? That people have learned how to use these tools in the last couple of years. And he's saying, especially the younger CEOs, they're not going to require all of their employees to go back to the office. Right. So all those people now have so much more flexibility. Like imagine you're living in New York City and you don't have to go to the office anymore. Maybe you only go on Monday and Tuesday. That means now every weekend could be a long weekend somewhere else. Right. Versus before, if you have to be in the office Monday to Friday, like how many vacation days do people get on average in the US?
Not enough.
No.
I have no idea. Dude, I've never had a real job before, so I don't know.
I remember when I worked for a Dutch company in an office in Chicago, and in Holland we get 30 days a year, and I kept those days. I kept those vacation days, and my American colleagues were getting 10, maybe 15 at the most.
Right.
So they were all jealous of me doing all these trips. But I was thinking, if you have imagine you have 10 or 15 vacation days, like how often per year can you take a trip?
Right.
It's not very often. There's a couple of weekends where there's a national holiday where you can do like a 3-day, long weekend. Maybe you can do once or twice a year. You can do like a week-long trip. But that's about it. And then you have to visit family and there's, friends. And I don't know. It just seems to me that if you have that few holidays or vacation days, then you can't really do a lot of trips. But if you're only at the office a couple days a week, or if you work from home all the time, then what keeps you from doing a weekend trip like every month?
So it's interesting because like all the things that we started implementing when quarantine first started, to happen, all the things that we started implementing with the working locations in the Airbnbs or short-term rentals and the fast internet, and really starting to target to that. We thought that was quick fixes, but what you're saying and what Brian's saying is that this is kind of the standard now for short-term rentals, is to cater to people. Obviously we have our leisure guests, but also to cater to people who want to escape the city for a bit and just have a different environment. So that's going to be the future of short-term rentals.
Yeah, exactly. Like people just have way more flexibility to travel. And I think for a lot of people, that's going to be the normal, like especially for younger people, right?
Right.
Because younger people are more likely to adopt technology and change to a different lifestyle as well. So what Brian was saying, like, look, if the younger CEOs who are like in their 30s or maybe early 40s, they might not ever go back to a traditional office. Did you know a company called Buffer?
No.
Buffer. I remember it's a technology company, and I remember 10 years ago when I started traveling as a digital nomad, that was the first company that I heard of where all the employees work remotely. There's no office. They just don't have an office, and I think they have like 100 or 150 people working for them.
Got it. Yeah.
So what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's funny, man, because I do see that quite often. I think the older school type of companies, and there's certain industries that will never walk away from that. It's very difficult for law firms and, corporations like that. But the people that we're targeting, especially our new brand, the people that we're targeting want to disconnect from the office and they want to explore. They're open to doing that. And we're so used to our lives being digital. So it makes sense that more and more companies are going to do that. With talking about this, though, it's so interesting because I'm personally desiring more of a connection with our team. Right. Our team started as a digital team and we have team members all around the world. But as we grow and the more that we accomplish with our company and now with our new property brand that we're launching, I'm actually desiring our team to come together. Right. So will that happen? I'm not sure, but we do an extremely well job on, running our companies virtually. And it's something that Samantha and I just mapped out for our lifestyle of splitting our time between Lucadia and Idlewild, so we can work on the property and get that property really dialed in. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing up there, right? But it's not going to, outside of my personal life down here of the gym, my friends, the things that we like to do here, it's not going to disrupt anything when it comes to the business world, because I literally can take this entire setup and bring it anywhere I want. I have a microphone, have a couple of lights and a laptop, and that's our business, right? Which is crazy to think about. So it makes sense. So how do, how do the average Airbnb host or the growing short-term rental company leverage this new revolution that's happening in the travel space?
Yeah, so I think the most interesting part of that is, obviously, like I think there's going to be more demand, right, for short-term rentals, because these people, if the people go on more trips, they need to stay somewhere. Now, I think the first question is like, where are those people going? Right now, if I look at myself, when I was in lockdown in Barcelona, I wasn't allowed to leave the province. Right now, I wanted to do something, so I went on Airbnb and I rented the place on Airbnb, but I didn't just want to rent, a normal place. I also didn't want to be in a different city, because, I'm already living in the city. I want to go somewhere, outside of the city. And I wanted to be special because initially when I thought about it, I was like, well, I'd rather just jump on the plane and go to Egypt or Morocco. It's a few hours away. Like if I wasn't locked up, that's what I would have done. So I thought, okay, well, if I'm not flying to like an exotic country where things are like super different, then at least I want to stay. I want something else that makes my trip special and unique and outstanding. So that's why I rented a castle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, and it's interesting because, you know, if there was no lockdown, I would never have discovered that castle, because I would never look on Airbnb in my area.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because like it's where short-term rentals were leading up into the coronavirus was all urban markets, right? Like you had those destination spots, like unique experiences always did well, but now they're at the top of the mind, right? Like they're the number one researched spots on Airbnb. So that makes sense. And we all know this, but what's interesting is like that is now the new business, right? And that goes into the topic of what we're talking about is, you know, the biggest opportunity in this industry is finding those secondary markets, right? And converting those old vacation rental properties to new modern short-term rental experiences, right? So what we're doing in Idlewild, what we're doing with our properties, what we plan on doing around the country over the next few years is finding these older properties that no one's really been going to. They've been doing like direct bookings and maybe Vrbo, right? Like those two. Airbnb wasn't really the focus, but now like taking those and converting them to the new modern short-term rental experience. I think that is the biggest opportunity of finding those properties. And also it's the way that we're taking these over. You know, for years we've been teaching people, and we still today teach people through Legends X and everything else that we do on how to scale short-term rental operation companies, right? So management companies at a whole. But we're starting to notice that even in these crazy real estate markets, moving into the space of acquiring real estate, especially in these secondary markets, I think that's going to be a huge wealth creator for many people around the world over the next couple of years, like now and into the near future. You know, we're watching already in the towns that we're looking at, all the, you know, I think this for a handful of different reasons. One, obviously, is guests are traveling to those areas, right? So if you go on AirDNA and you kind of expand out for every major city in the US, you'll see that the cities are low on occupancy. They're not doing great, especially on the West Coast, like LA, San Francisco, not doing great. Chicago, not doing great. As great as they used to be, I should say. But if you go 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours outside those cities and you find those smaller secondary towns, they're doing great. They're doing, you know, 70, 80, 90% occupancy for most part of the year, which is kind of crazy. But then we're also seeing the real estate market. If you compare occupancy to the real estate market, they're racing to the top in those markets, which is crazy to me, right? So we're not only seeing more and more people that want to travel there, but we're also seeing more and more people that want to move there. So now in the industry, the way that I'm looking at this is like our short-term rental business is going to do extremely well. But then our wealth, our personal wealth, our corporate wealth of what we're developing by acquiring all this real estate 5-10 years from now, when more and more people are trying to leave the urban areas and get into more space, they're going to want to buy our properties, right? So if we decide to sell real estate in the future, we're in these markets where more and more people are moving to. I'm not saying that cities are going to collapse. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I think so I just started reading the book again. This is my third time reading it, Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Just finished reading the first chapter this morning. And he was talking about, the first chapter is called No One's Crazy, right? And how he's essentially saying how people's financial decisions in life are 100% shaped by the experiences they have in life, right? So, and it all matters. It all determines what you go through life, how you look at making financial decisions with your own money, right? So if you were born during the Great Depression, you're not going to have much faith in the stock market, right? You're more likely to invest in real estate, right? If you were born in I don't know, the crypto days, whatever you pick whatever it is, you may be more bullish on investing in high risk crypto than you are investing in slow growth real estate, right? So I think what we're seeing now, and I'm tying it back to what we're experiencing now, I truly believe that the generation that's going through the virus right now, going through lockdowns and going through all the crazy stuff that's coming along with this, they're going to want to stay the hell away from cities. You know, like, yes, we're kind of, our generation is kind of starting that now, moving into these secondary markets. But my guess is that I think more and more people are going to want to move into these. They still want to enjoy the cities, but they don't want to live in the cities. Like, I just don't see that anymore. I think the major cities are always going to be there, but I think more and more people are going to want their space. I think the generation that is growing up through the lockdowns are going to want more of their space and go into these secondary markets, not be living in the city, not be living in the area. So I think long term, we have an amazing play by acquiring all this real estate, 2 to 3 hour drives from every metro city in the country. And then in the meantime, we're going to ride the wave of this new travel trend that's happening, right? And then if we can give them a little bit of what they need, air quotes, what they need is the best internet in that area, a workstation, all of that stuff, but then also give them a unique experience to disconnect from that stuff and actually reconnect with nature and all that other travelers. I think that is the biggest opportunity right now that we can focus on. Short-term riches through maximizing short-term rental trend, and then long-term wealth by acquiring all this real estate in these areas where I truly believe more and more people are going to be moving to over the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, something that you have mentioned to me a few times, which I think is really on point, is like these markets, there always have been vacation rentals in these places, right? But it was a different type of avatar that used to travel there, right? Often people who, you know, maybe go with their family and they go every single year around the same week, they always go to this place, right? And we're seeing that with the property that we have bought, right? There's a lot of people that have reached out to us and have said like, hey, we've been coming to this place for years. We always stay in this cabin, you know. Yep. They're just very used to that. And that was kind of like the avatar, but now there's a new avatar of, you know, people like yourself and your girlfriend, you know, who just want to go for a short disconnect from the city, right? And we're looking for a bit of a different type of experience. You know, I remember when I rented that castle, you know, the castle was amazing, the host was awesome, but very, very old school, like very old school, right? No pricing optimization. Like I was shocked when I saw the prices that I could rent that place for. It was really shocking to me. Number two is, you know, the communication, right? Like kind of like an old school email with kind of information all over the place, kind of hard to read, hard to kind of understand. And you know, we are, you know, the type of avatar that we are and that we're catering to is the person we just kind of want. We want our information to be provided in a way that we can easily find what we're looking for. We're looking for some convenience. We're looking for, you know, a seamless experience, right? We don't want to like get stopped and having to try and figure things out. We just want everything to be simple and easy to understand, I think, right? And that's where, you know, if I were to take over that castle, like, man, that would be nuts. Like I think I'd probably triple the revenue on that thing, and by providing a better experience, right?
I mean, we're seeing that now with Strawberry Creek Village, right? Is just by going in there and creating new listings, Airbnb listings, and updating the customer service and just adding a couple of things, our revenue from day one is higher than what the previous owner was doing on this property. And we haven't done anything to the property yet. We haven't updated the marketing. Excuse me. We haven't updated the brand, I should say. We haven't really focused on professional photos or anything like that to draw in the newer traveler there. It's just by tweaking a couple of things that were there, we already seen an increase in the ADR, which is incredible. Now, with all of this said too, is I'm not condoning. I think there's something really, I know this, but we're experiencing this in the moment now with Strawberry Creek Village. And I think it's really important for the listeners, like people who are focused on doing this as a business model of like going into these secondary markets, buying old vacation rental properties and converting them to modern short-term rental experiences. I think it's super important to recognize that we have to bring that modern touch that the modern traveler is desiring in these properties, but we can't fully let go of what makes those towns special, right? So we can't go into these towns and bring the city into these secondary markets, right? We have to just bring some modern touches to the existing properties, but then leaving what that local area, that local sauce, if you will, what makes it special to that property, right? So like, for example, what we're doing in Idlewild is a beautiful town. It's like everything there is from the 1950s. They don't even have a stoplight there. It's a very tiny town. They take pride in the history of that town. They take pride in the fact that there's no commercial box corporate companies there, right? So if we come in and start building all these just like fancy San Diego, LA style buildings, architecture there, and really start catering to them, we're going to stand out. We're going to stand out in not in a positive way in that town, right? We want to be part of what makes that town special, but then also target the people that are already traveling there that are seeking something a bit different. What I mean by this too is like, the people that have been staying at Strawberry Creek Village have been giving us some really awesome feedback where you and I stepped into the properties and I'm like, I want to update this. I want to change this. This is terrible, blah, blah, blah. But we're not getting that feedback from the customers. The customers are actually, or the guests are actually happy with the way that it is. So now it's kind of shifting the way that what I was thinking about with the renovation of the current 4 units, right? So I think we have to understand who's traveling there and what they want. And what they want is to experience that, what those secondary towns bring different than the cities. But then also we have the ability to add in some modern touches to the properties that will attract those modern travelers to our properties versus all the competition in the area. So with that said, what I'm trying to say is like, I think the biggest opportunity is buying these properties, but I also think we can shoot ourselves in the foot if we tear down what makes those secondary towns special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think, everything that we're adding, it shouldn't be out of line with local culture, right? I think, and what you can find there locally, I think, for just an example, right? Like we have feedback from a guest saying they were having trouble with the lockbox, right? So, instead of lockbox, we're installing smart locks, right? Where people get the code, right? So that doesn't go against like, the feel of the town or anything like that. That's just a little upgrade that will add to the experience, right? The convenience. Right. Other examples are we installed better internet, right? And we renamed one thing that drives me crazy is if I stay at an Airbnb and then the Wi-Fi, the network name is, a 16 string mix of random characters and numbers and weird symbols and stuff. And then the password as well. Right. And you have to find like the piece of paper. And every time you put in the password, you make a small mistake. You put a G instead of a 9, or right. You make some sort of mistake and then you have to type it again. So we renamed all the Wi-Fi networks to the name of the cabin and then just a simple password, right? That's easy to understand and to remember. So those are small upgrades, right? Getting Netflix and Apple TVs in there. Those are small upgrades. Sending online guidebooks versus like an email.
Yep.
those are small upgrades that go a long way, when it comes to the experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't really cost us much to do all that stuff, right? So it's like we're not changing the bones of this property. So people still appreciate the traditional side of the experience, but then we have this modern touch, right? So modern locks, updated internet. The internet's better than the internet I have here. I can see that my internet's breaking up here, right? And it's like it's crazy that we have better internet up there than here in San Diego. But yeah, so it's small things like that. And then as we start developing down there, those tiny homes, we're going to continue that traditional feel. How do we build with materials that are familiar to that town and to that area? And then how do we serve the guest that's there, but with that modern touch? So, but yeah, so this is what I'm mostly excited about. Honestly, like it's something that I'm super pumped about. For the Legends Mastermind that we have coming up in January. I'm getting more and more people reaching out to me, more and more business owners reaching out to me that are in this space, that see that opportunity as well, that are doing this all throughout the country, that are joining this program. So I'm recognizing, or joining the mastermind, I should say. What I'm recognizing is like that's the new trend, is heading towards how do we start acquiring real estate? How do we take we've been talking about this for years. It's like build your experience operationally in the short-term rental space. If you're leasing or managing, I think everyone knows that we're not huge fans of the leasing model anymore. But that's why we put all our focus into building the management side. Because regardless if you invest in the whatever you do, if you're an investor buying real estate, you still have the management arm, right? You still have the management side. It's two completely different businesses. So especially if you're just getting started in this industry, focus on building the management side and get super good at creating and managing world-class short-term rental experiences. And then if you inject that into the ownership side, now we have something beautiful that's growing long-term, right? We have short-term cash flow coming in, long-term wealth through the real estate side. And that's why we're able to attract in the investors that we're working with to expand our model, because we have the understanding of growing a short-term rental brand, and we have the ability to maintain the operational side of it, right? So there's a lot that's happening right now in the industry, a lot of different shifts. I'm super excited about 2022 to see how this affects the industry as a whole. But I guarantee you right now, we're going to see more and more unique companies popping up, and they're going to be the new hot thing. And I think, prior to COVID, we watched all the master lease companies like Sonder and Lyric and Stay Alfred get all the news and noteworthy conversations. Now I see more companies like us where we're acquiring land, but then we have this unique short-term rental brand on top of it, are going to be the biggest companies in our space. So I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about the legends that are going to be coming out to our next mastermind, because I think we're going to be talking about this topic quite a bit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm super excited about the live events. I mentioned it last week, but I was so bummed when I saw all the pictures last week at VMRA, and I was like, damn it.
Yeah. We had a good time down there, but yeah, it's time. We'll announce the Legends Mastermind on a different show, kind of all the details, because we're still ironing it out. But we are getting back to live events, and I just can't wait to get people in the room, create those experiences again, and really understand where the industry is heading now, going into the new year.
Yeah, man, 100%. Super excited about that. And I think also, a lot of people are recognizing this opportunity that we're talking about. Because I'm getting people to reach out and with questions around this. Like yesterday, for example, spoke to some people who want to buy like 20 to 30 short-term rental properties in these markets, but they're not sure like which market to go to, right? Our investor is super eager for us to buy more of these. So it's
a good problem to have.
Yeah, and I was asked yesterday too by people I was speaking to if we were looking for new investors. So it just sounds to me like there's just a lot of the interest in the investing in the short-term rental space is just is there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of money on the sideline looking for return, right? It's so hard to I mean, I was talking to our investor, and he was saying how he now has to pay money to get us on his savings, like on a savings account, right? Where you have money on a savings account. This is in Europe. I don't know if this is the case in the US, yes, but there's a negative interest rate. Wow. So you're actually paying, it's very small, like 0.05% or something like that. But the idea that you're putting money in the bank and you don't have to pay for that privilege, you know,
it's so crazy, right?
I remember when I was young, I had a savings account, and I was getting 6% interest on my savings account. Now that if you tell younger people that, they're like, what are you talking about? You get interest just on a savings account?
Yeah. Well, dude, that goes back to that book, Psychology and Money, right? In the first chapter is that no one's crazy. And you experience that. I've never experienced that. I've never experienced that in my accounts, right? It's always been very low interest to zero interest, right? In saving accounts. So,
yeah,
but yeah, so like, that's why we're getting approached by so many different people to want to invest in our new model. It goes back to when we first got hit with the lockdowns, when you and I were in San Diego, you were like, hey man, I'm not worried about this, I'm not worried about the economy short-term, what's going to happen with this virus. I'm not worried about the elections, because back then we were going through the elections. You're like, my number one concern is inflation. Right. And you said that, and you were educating me on that. And I'm like, you're like, your number one concern is inflation. We're now seeing that, right? Over the last 6 months, we're seeing real inflation starting to hit, especially here in the US. And they're predicting that inflation is going to continue to grow, right? So it's like, people with cash, what do we do with that? What do we do with our cash? We can't have it sit in the bank, right? This is why we have investors coming to us and saying like, hey, we have cash. You guys have access to real estate. You have the ability to do something cool and make more money on this real estate. So let's put this cash to work, right? So it's like, people just want to dump their money into real estate and hold it there because we're all feeling that inflation. And the US government here tries to hide it, saying that there is no inflation, but you look at everything from gas to lumber to food, and it's more expensive. It's more expensive now than it was last year, right? And there's no way around that. And there's no, like, that's not BS, and it's only going to get worse. So what do we do with the cash that we have? We don't want to leave it in, I mean, you could talk about this for hours, but like, we don't want to leave it in our bank. So people like our investors want to invest in real estate. And to me, I think that's what's so crazy right now with this real estate market. It's like, we have the crazy, like the highest real estate market we've ever seen in most parts of the world. And we just have more and more people that just want to dump cash into real estate. So I think going into these secondary markets, building that hospitality brand to capture the current travel trends, modernizing the properties, but then just dumping cash into this real estate, holding for a few years. I think we're going to see a lot of people make a lot of wealth in these secondary markets.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, you know, we won't go into the rabbit hole of inflation and central banks and all of that stuff. But what I will say is, you know, when you look at how the government, and not just US, like pretty much around the world, how they calculate what they call the CPI, like the core price index, they conveniently leave out the stuff that goes up the most, right? You know, like rents, and, you know, they call it core CPI, like X food and energy and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think just people who go to a supermarket can tell, right? People who go to, you know, the gas station, like you can tell you rent something. I mean, it's crazy to me that rent is not included. I mean, it's, you know, that's a big part of your living costs, you know, it doesn't make sense.
For most people,
right?
Yeah, for most people.
Anyway, yeah, man. Well, this is such an exciting time to be in the short-term rental industry, because there's a lot changing. You know, like going back to what we started with, you know, Brian Chesky talking about the revolution in travel, and I think he's right. and because I just remember when I quit my job in 2010, I sold all my stuff and I started renting out my place on Airbnb, and I started traveling around with my laptop. And, I was doing all sorts of stuff back then. I was, trying to make money online. I was learning how to make money online. And I remember very well that for the whole of 2010, 11, even 2012, every time I explained somebody what I did, they looked at me weird.
Yeah.
They always asked me, where do you live? And I was like, I don't live anywhere. And they're like, what do you mean you don't live anywhere? Everybody lives somewhere. Like, are you on a holiday? And I was like, no, I'm just here, just working from here now. And next month I go somewhere else. That concept there was nobody that understood that. It was completely crazy. And it was crazy to me as well when I first met a person who was doing that inspired me to do it.
Right.
Now you go on Facebook and you put digital nomad and a major city, and there's like a Facebook group of 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 people in there. There's millions of people that live that lifestyle now. So the reason why I'm saying this is, now if you hear Brian Chesky talk about the revolution in travel, you might be thinking, well, things don't change that quickly. But I mean, in 10 years, a lot has changed, and 10 years is not that long if you think about it, especially when you're investing in real estate, because that's something for the long term, right? So
that's right.
So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. But my prediction is that I really do believe that there's a big changes, and obviously, like you said, cities are always going to be there. There's always going to be people traveling to cities. All of the stuff that has always been there will still be there. But I do think there's the trends are shifting for sure.
I agree. And, this is something that we're going to be talking about quite a bit. So in our emails that we send out and social media and upcoming podcasts, we're just going to kind of be talking a bit deeper into this topic. So one thing that I would love to do before we wrap up is let's kind of tell everybody the changes that are happening with the podcast. Can you still hear me?
Yep. I
cool.
hear you loud and clear.
I promise I'm going to get my internet hooked up here. Let's tell everybody what's happening with the podcast, like the changes that are happening with your show, and then the consistency with this show. And by the way, for everyone who is listening, if you guys have made it this far in this podcast, if you can do us a favor, Jasper and I recognize that we've been very consistent with this podcast as a whole. Jasper, you've been consistent for many years with this podcast, but we never really ask the audience for much on this, and we never really put any real focus towards asking for people to subscribe or leave comments or reviews on the podcast. So if you guys enjoy this podcast, we definitely need your support. We're going to be putting a lot of time into growing this podcast, getting some bigger names on here, going deeper into these conversations. And it's something that obviously you and I really enjoy doing. So if you guys enjoy this podcast, getting some value from this, we would love for you to subscribe and then also leave us a really good comment or review on the podcast, either on Spotify or Apple. Really helps us with the ranking. It helps us really kind of get the name out. So really support, love the support on this if you guys don't mind doing that. So Jasper, before we wrap up, why don't you kind of tell everybody what's happening with the podcast? We have now 2 regular shows on the podcast. Who are the shows for, and when can they expect to hear them?
Yeah, for sure. So, as people who've been listening to the podcast for a few years probably know, I've always been, it's been like I've always done it on the fly, like kind of winging every podcast, like bringing different type of guests and, just kind of see where the conversation goes. That's always how I've enjoyed doing it. But, like since you and I started doing a show together, we've been really thinking about how do we reach like a bigger audience, and how do we structure the podcast better in a way that like it's very clear for people, like what are we talking about, what's the structure of the podcast, what can you expect. So we want to really up the game and work on this together as a team, like you and I, Eric. So what we figured out is on Monday, I'm going to keep doing the podcast like I've always been doing. And I'm going to be focused on the smaller hosts, right? The Airbnb one-on-one, how to get started on Airbnb, how to optimize your listings, like hearing from Airbnb hosts from all around the world. And that's really how this podcast started, right? Now on Fridays, you and I are going to keep doing this podcast that we're doing right now, where it's you and I just talking about our experiences when it comes to the coaching side, when it comes to our programs, our mastermind, but also when it comes to the properties that we're investing in, right? So that's really for the people who are interested in following our journey and understanding why we're making decisions, what we're learning, what we're going through. And then you're going to do a third show that's going to go live every Wednesday. And you'll probably start in the next couple of weeks, I imagine. With that.
Yeah. So we'll kind of announce that once we get closer to it. But the whole concept here is I personally want to sit down with the CEOs of companies that are really driving the industry forward. So founders and CEOs of the big tech companies, of the big investors, all within the hospitality industry. It's just the topic that I'm truly interested in. And, I really enjoy having those conversations. So really the concept behind Get Paid for Your Pad podcast moving forward is Mondays, you're going to have the host show. And that's where you're focused on Airbnb 101, sitting down with hosts. That's where you learn how to get started on Airbnb or learn how to optimize your first listing. Essentially, that's the best way of looking at that. Hear from hosts to understand how to become a better host or get started in the Airbnb space. Every Friday, you and I will have this show. This is more free flow conversation. I think it's kind of for everybody to kind of hear what's happening in the industry as a whole. But I think we have a unique perspective because one, we're coaching hundreds of hosts from all different sizes on scaling their businesses from around the world. So we have a unique perspective on the industry as a whole. So you're going to hear from that. But then we're also working on growing a really large investment hospitality brand in this space as well. So we're going to be speaking from our lessons of doing that, of investing millions of dollars into real estate, growing this hospitality brand, and really just kind of, I look at that as almost like the Joe Rogan style conversation around hospitality and short-term rentals. But then the third show is really going to be made for existing hosts that are looking to scale their brands, or if you're currently at scale, tapping into those conversations. So we'll announce that when we get closer to announcing that third show. But that will be a weekly show focused on scale, focused on hospitality, short-term rentals at scale. So, but yeah, guys, this is going to be the next version of Get Paid for Your Pad podcast. I'm excited about the consistency behind this. And I guess one last, ask here again, if you guys haven't done so, just make sure that you subscribe and then leave us a review. It truly, truly does help us. That's literally the only way that we can grow this podcast and continue to see if the content we're putting out in the world is actually useful, is through the subscriptions and through the reviews. So we truly support that help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited. I've been doing this since 2014 for about 7 years as a solo. What you call it, a lone wolf. Yeah. So I'm excited to team up with you and take this thing to the next level.
It's gonna be fun, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Sweet. All righty. Well, that's it for today. So thank you for listening. And like Eric said, we'll be back probably next couple of weeks. We'll still have the 2 shows, but we'll announce when Eric's solo show will start as well. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out, guys.